Today's video is about a Chicago stripper who changed a millionaire's life forever and ended up destroying him in ways no one saw coming. How could a secret affair, a hidden illness, and one shocking betrayal spiral into a murder investigation that shook the city? Tonight, we uncover the twisted chain of lies, manipulation, and danger, and reveal the moment when everything went silent, leaving the truth darker than anyone imagined. Chicago breathed neon after midnight, a feverish glow soaking cracked sidewalks and tired faces. Inside the club, bass thumped like a second heartbeat. Lena moved beneath lights that promised freedom yet demanded obedience, smiling on cue, collecting cash, hiding bruises nobody asked about, while remembering home felt impossibly far away. She learned early that names dissolved under music. Customers wanted fantasies, not histories. Lena gave them glitter and distance, a practiced laugh, a controlled sway. What she kept was loneliness, folded tight behind her ribs, growing heavier each night she counted tips alone, before dawn blurred promises into regrets again. Tonight felt different before she knew why. A man watched without hunger, eyes calm, expensive, measuring. He tipped without touching, spoke without shouting. When their gazes locked, something steadied in her chest, as if chosen rather than rented, seen rather than purchased by someone who knew silence well that night. His name arrived later, almost carelessly, Ethan. He asked for a private dance, then conversation instead. He listened. That alone disarmed her. He spoke of travel, of buildings bearing his signature, of discretion as a kindness, not a threat promised quietly while eyes never once wandered toward anyone else nearby. Lena noticed the watch first, heavy and precise, catching light like a verdict. She noticed his stillness, how money bent rooms around him. When he smiled, it was practiced restraint. When he stood, bouncers nodded, rules adjusting themselves without words as if gravity favored him tonight alone beyond the door. Backstage, mirrors multiplied her doubts. Makeup cracked where sweat insisted. Ethan waited, unbothered, offering water, offering patience. He asked about her day, not her body. The question startled her. Answers spilled anyway, careful, partial, hungry for safety she rarely trusted yet wanted desperately to believe could exist tonight here now. They talked past closing, the club emptying like a confession. Ethan mentioned a car waiting. No pressure, he said. Just air quiet, a drink somewhere private. Lena weighed rent against instinct, fear against curiosity, survival against longing, counting consequences she never learned to price within the city tonight alone together. Outside, Chicago exhaled cold truth. The alley smelled of rain and cigarettes. A black sedan idled, windows dark, engine whispering promises. Ethan held the door without touching her, a gentlemanly distance that felt safer than hands. Lena hesitated, heart-loud beating questions she feared asking aloud under flickering streetlights nearby. She thought of rules she'd made and broken. Never leave with strangers. Never trust quiet men. Never confuse kindness for safety. Ethan smiled, patient as money. He offered a coat, draped warmth across her shoulders, and waited for consent to be given without hurry, without witnesses, without names tonight only. Lena stepped closer, decision crystallizing under neon echoes. The door opened, leather and shadow inviting her inside. As she slid onto the seat, the club disappeared behind tinted glass. She didn't know the man beside her would reshape everything. The car pulled away, swallowing fate before dawn judged them all. The car moved smoothly, city lights streaking like erased memories across glass. Lena watched reflections replace certainty, her pulse slowing as the club's noise faded. Ethan spoke little, offering a destination without a name. Trust formed strangely in the quiet, fed by comfort, by the absence of urgency, by the way he let her choose every small thing. They arrived at a private bar above the river, closed to the public, guarded by discretion rather than locks. Inside, warmth wrapped them. Ethan ordered without looking at a menu, asked Lena what she preferred, listened carefully to the answer. He paid before the drinks arrived. Money didn't flash, it settled. Over bourbon and dim light, Ethan revealed himself in fragments. He built companies, he said, not legacies. He avoided headlines. He valued control because chaos had once cost him dearly. Lena shared less, speaking around the sharpest edges. Still, she felt herself leaning forward, attention tethered, wanting to be understood without being owned. Days passed, then nights. Ethan returned, always precise, always calm. He arranged rides, sent meals, asked questions that felt intimate yet safe. Lena learned his habits before his history. He preferred quiet corners, clean lines, rules followed. When he touched her, it was deliberate, almost reverent, like an agreement signed with breath rather than ink. The gifts came next, subtle and escalating. Rent paid anonymously. A phone with one contact saved. Clothes chosen for comfort, not display. Each kindness tightened the circle, making escape unnecessary and unimaginable. Lena told herself this was different. She told herself affection could exist without debt. Ethan eventually invited her to his penthouse. The space was immaculate, overlooking a city he seemed to command by indifference. He poured wine, asked her to sit, and set boundaries like terms. No photos, no questions about his past, no expectations beyond honesty in the present. Discretion, he said, protected them both. Lena nodded, relief and unease colliding. She mistook the rules for care. She mistook silence for respect. In his arms, the world simplified. Outside, noise disappeared. Inside, doubts softened, sedated by security and attention she'd never known. She began skipping shifts, telling lies that felt harmless because they felt chosen. One night, half asleep, she asked where he went when he vanished for days. Ethan stiffened, then smiled, gentle but firm. He kissed her forehead and repeated the rule. Some truths, he said, were better left untouched. The warmth cooled, the power shifted. Lena apologized without knowing why. That night, Lena dreamed of locked rooms and velvet ropes, of doors opening only when permission was granted. She woke restless, checking the phone Ethan provided, waiting for messages that arrived exactly when expected. Predictability felt like safety. Yet beneath it, a faint dread pulsed, telling her that dependence grows quietly, like a shadow stretching longer when light is carefully controlled. She ignored it, dressing for comfort, not escape, convincing herself stability was simply another word for love tonight. Weeks later, he handed her an envelope. Inside was cash and a card to a private clinic. Routine, he said. Responsible, he spoke carefully, measuring words like assets. Lena agreed, telling herself it was normal, mature, protective. Still, the request hummed with warning beneath its polish. As she left the penthouse, city air biting her lungs, Lena realized how thoroughly her life now fit between Ethan's schedules. She felt held and hidden, cherished and controlled. The elevator doors closed, sealing the arrangement. Above, Ethan watched the city. Below, Lena carried his rules forward, unaware they were already rewriting her future. Morning arrived thin and colorless, the city washed pale by rain. Lena sat in her bathroom, staring at the test, its quiet certainty louder than any club. 2 lines. She pressed the stick against the sink as if pressure could blur truth. Her hands shook, then steadied, then shook again, a cycle she recognized as fear learning to speak. She told herself timing was wrong, not impossible. She counted weeks by memory, missed shifts, careful nights, Ethan's rules bending without breaking. He had been gentle, attentive, present. Protection had been discussed, assumed, trusted. Trust, she realized, had no receipt. It left no trail except consequences. The clinic card Ethan gave her burned in her pocket. She booked an appointment anyway, walking through antiseptic halls that smelled like honesty. A nurse asked routine questions. Lena answered selectively, protecting a version of herself that still believed control meant safety. Blood was drawn, forms signed. Results would take time. Time suddenly felt dangerous. She waited 3 days before telling Ethan. He listened in silence, face composed, eyes narrowing just enough to recalibrate the room. He asked when. He asked how sure. He asked what she wanted. When she said she didn't know, relief flickered across his features, brief and unguarded. He promised support, then pivoted to logistics. Options arrived framed as solutions. Discretion, a private doctor. Financial help without complication. He spoke of risk and exposure, of timing and reputation, of protecting everyone involved. Love hid between clauses, implied but never named. Lena nodded, absorbing language that turned a life into a problem to be solved. Days passed with scheduled calm. Ethan visited less. Messages shortened. Affection thinned into efficiency. When she tried to imagine motherhood, images fractured. Lullabies interrupted by sirens, diapers paid with silence, a future built on conditions. Her body changed quietly, a whisper beneath clothes, an ache beneath resolve. The clinic called. Results were ready. Lena returned alone, sitting beneath posters promising care without judgment. The doctor spoke gently, choosing words that floated before landing. Everything looked normal for now, the pregnancy early but viable. Relief surged, then stalled, tangled with dread she couldn't name yet. She left with pamphlets and a follow-up date. On the sidewalk, she called Ethan. He answered immediately, voice smooth, attentive. She told him the news. He congratulated her, then paused, recalculating. He asked about tests. She said some results were pending. The pause lengthened. That evening, Ethan arrived unannounced. He brought flowers and a folder. They sat across from each other like negotiators. He explained responsibility as process, not feeling. He wanted certainty before commitment, medical certainty. Full panels, documentation. He would arrange everything. It was reasonable, he said, prudent. Lena felt the room tilt. She wanted reassurance, not protocols. She wanted his hand on her back, not signatures. When she asked what he was afraid of, he smiled kindly, the smile he used to close deals. Fear, he said, was expensive. Prevention was cheaper. They argued softly, circling truths without touching them. She accused him of distance. He accused her of urgency. Both avoided the word trapped. Finally, he reached for her, a brief embrace, careful not to linger. He kissed her hair, promised to protect them, and left the folder behind. Alone, Lena opened it. Consent forms, appointment times, tests listed in neat columns. She felt suddenly small, her body reduced to risk assessment. Outside, traffic roared, indifferent. Inside, the future narrowed to a hallway with bright lights and questions waiting. She closed the folder, heart pounding. Tomorrow she would go. Tomorrow answers would come. She didn't know that certainty would arrive carrying devastation, or that the test he demanded would split their lives into before and after, rewriting blame, love, and survival forever. As night settled, Lena stared at the ceiling, sensing a door opening somewhere unseen, behind which consequences waited, patient, rehearsed, and far less merciful than promises tomorrow. The clinic smelled of disinfectant and patience. Lena sat beneath a flickering light, fingers laced, listening to her breath echo too loudly. Yesterday's certainty had hardened overnight into dread. She remembered Ethan's folder, the neat columns, the promise of prevention. She remembered agreeing because agreement felt easier than asking why. A nurse called her name with practiced neutrality. Lena followed, counting steps, noticing the hum of machines, the kindness rehearsed into routine. Blood work, the nurse said. Standard panels. Lena nodded, offering an arm, watching crimson thread into vials like answers being siphoned away. She asked how long. Soon came the reply, a word that never meant the same thing twice. Waiting stretched. Lena scrolled her phone, stopping at Ethan's contact, starting a message she erased. She studied posters about responsibility, protection, awareness. Faces smiled too brightly. Time slowed, thickened, then snapped when the doctor entered, closing the door gently, as if softness could prepare the ground. The doctor sat across from her, voice low, careful. Some results were back. One result needed repeating. Lena felt the room lean forward. Words arrived like rain through a roof she didn't know was cracked. Reactive, confirmatory testing. Next steps, treatment options. Lena heard fragments, not sentences, as meaning rearranged her body. She asked one question, is it sure? The doctor nodded, compassion steady, explaining margins and timelines, how modern medicine could help, how life could continue. Lena nodded too, a mirror without comprehension. She thought of the pregnancy, of cells dividing faithfully, unaware of verdicts. She thought of trust, how easily it had settled into her bones. Tears came late, polite, as if waiting their turn. The doctor handed tissues, outlined support, scheduled referrals. Lena signed forms she didn't read. When she stood, her legs trembled, then obeyed. In the hallway, the hum grew louder, accusatory. She wanted air, wanted night, wanted the rules back. Outside, the city felt sharper. Sounds cut. She called Ethan, hands numb. Voicemail. She left nothing. She walked until exhaustion insisted she stop, then sat on a bench, staring at water, moving with purpose she lacked. She replayed nights, moments, assumptions, searching for a breach she could label. Her phone buzzed. A clinic number. She answered, heart racing. The nurse spoke carefully. Because of reporting protocols, partners would be notified, confidentially. Lena swallowed. She said she understood, though understanding had abandoned her hours ago. The call ended, leaving quiet that pressed in. Ethan called minutes later. His voice was tight, controlled. He asked where she was. He asked what the doctor said. Lena told him the truth in plain words. Silence followed, dense and dangerous. When he spoke again, anger cut through polish. He said she had lied. He said she had trapped him. He said this would ruin everything. She tried to explain timelines, symptoms, ignorance. He interrupted, reciting risks, consequences, exposure. He said he needed tests immediately. He said lawyers would advise him. He said not to speak to anyone. The rules returned, heavier now, edged with threat. Lena agreed, reflexively, apologizing for a crime she didn't understand. After the call, she vomited into the gutter, shaking. Shame arrived like an old friend, familiar and cruel. She texted the clinic to confirm appointments. She stared at her hands, imagining blood as evidence, intimacy as liability. The pregnancy felt suddenly fragile, contested, political. Night fell. Lena lay awake, cataloging what could be proven and what would be denied. Her phone vibrated again, a message from an unknown number. It read simply, "Your partner has tested positive." The words burned. She understood then that the story would not be simple and blame would demand a body. She closed her eyes, knowing tomorrow would bring confrontations she couldn't avoid, and that truth, once spoken, would exact a price neither of them could afford. Justice felt distant, but consequences were already lining up, patient, unavoidable. Ethan demanded they meet in his penthouse, daylight exposing edges night had softened. Lena arrived carrying papers like shields, heart thudding with practiced apologies. The city spread beneath glass, indifferent. Ethan stood rigid, jaw set, suit immaculate, as if control itself had dressed him. He began without greeting. Accusations landed cleanly. Deception, negligence, intent. He spoke of exposure curves, of reputational harm, of trust violated beyond repair. Lena tried to explain timelines again, clinic dates, ignorance. He waved them away, insisting truth was irrelevant when damage was measurable. A lawyer joined them, introduced by first name only. The man's voice was velvet over steel. He explained liability, non-disclosure, civil remedies. Words became weapons arranged neatly on the table. Lena felt reduced to a variable. When she asked about compassion, the lawyer smiled, suggesting compassion followed compliance. Ethan slid a document toward her. It outlined confidentiality, cooperation, silence. In exchange, expenses covered, support provided, discretion guaranteed. He framed it as mercy. Lena read slowly, hands numb. The clauses erased her story, her fear, her pregnancy, compressing life into risk management. She refused at first. The word surprised them all. Ethan's eyes hardened, the last warmth extinguished. He leaned close, voice low, reminding her who controlled resources, narratives, outcomes. He said the city loved monsters and needed a face. He suggested she was convenient. Fear sharpened her memory. Nights replayed differently now. The rules, the clinic card, the insistence on testing after pregnancy. She asked whether he had known. The room stilled. Ethan laughed softly, denying, then pivoted, accusing her of paranoia born from guilt. Voices rose. Lena shouted about consent, about trust weaponized. Ethan countered with contracts, with precedent. The lawyer documented tone. The power imbalance crystallized, undeniable. Lena felt something inside fracture, grief turning acidic, protective instincts igniting around the child she carried. She signed nothing and left shaking. In the elevator, mirrors multiplied her panic. She called a clinic counselor, then a friend she hadn't spoken to in years. Words tangled. She learned how quickly support thinned when stakes rose. Silence felt contagious. Outside, cameras flashed. Someone had tipped the press. Headlines formed before facts. Lena pulled her hood up, fled, lungs burning. Online, comments multiplied, inventing motives, assigning blame. A caricature emerged, greedy and reckless, easier to punish than complexity. Ethan texted once. This is what happens without cooperation. The message felt like a verdict. Lena realized protection had always been conditional, love transactional. She cried for hours, then stopped. Survival recalibrated. She began documenting everything, messages, dates, patterns, promises. That night, cramps tightened her abdomen. At the hospital, a monitor traced fragile rhythms. The nurse asked about stress. Lena laughed bitterly. Stress, she thought, was the least precise word for collapse. The baby steadied. She breathed again. As dawn broke, Ethan's name trended. So did hers. He issued a statement expressing concern and denial. Lena read it from a plastic chair, understanding war had replaced romance. Blame had chosen her face, but truth still existed, buried, waiting for pressure. Her phone buzzed with a final message from an unknown number. We can make this end quietly. The cost will be higher tomorrow. Lena closed her eyes, knowing money couldn't cure what was coming, and that refusing silence would make everything burn. She saved the number and stood, leaving the hospital before paperwork finished. Rain needled the streets, smearing lights into warnings. Lena walked until the ache eased, until resolve replaced trembling. She would not disappear. She would learn statutes, timelines, medicine. She would find counsel who listened. She would protect the child and herself, even if protection meant exposure. Somewhere above, Ethan's world hummed with resources, spinning strategies, buying time. Somewhere below, Lena felt anger sharpen into clarity. If silence was currency, she would bankrupt it. She opened a new note and began listing questions that frightened her. Who knew first? When tests were taken? Why rules appeared when love should have? Each line steadied her breathing. By morning, she would choose confrontation over comfort, truth over hush money. The city waited, unsympathetic but awake. Tomorrow promised consequences measured in courtrooms and headlines, and Lena stepped forward, determined, knowing the next battle would demand everything from her. Morning news loops replayed Ethan's statement while Lena packed her bag, each phrase polished, bloodless, final. He expressed concern, denied wrongdoing, promised cooperation. The city swallowed it whole. Sponsors stayed silent. Friends vanished. Money moved quietly, smoothing angles. Lena felt its gravity everywhere. Bending coverage, bending conversations, bending her own breathing as she stepped outside into a world already persuaded before truth ever learned to speak for itself, now alone. Ethan's lawyers advanced faster than infection timelines, filing notices, issuing warnings, forecasting consequences. Lena retained counsel through a clinic referral, a woman who listened first. They reviewed messages, clinic dates, the folder. Patterns emerged, insistence on testing after pregnancy, urgency framed as prudence. Power dynamics became evidence. Still, money stretched proceedings, delayed clarity, exhausting Lena as weeks blurred into appointments. Stress nested deeply, sharpening nights, thinning days without mercy rest. Ethan deteriorated quietly. Paparazzi caught thinner frames, missed meetings, hospital entrances obscured by tinted glass. Rumors swelled, then settled. Treatments began. He blamed stress publicly, betrayal privately. Messages to Lena turned cruel, erratic, alternating threats with bargains. He offered settlements, confidentiality, protection again. She declined, documenting everything, noticing desperation leak through controlled language. She once mistook for calm that now fractured under pressure and fear exposure consequences mounting daily fast. Lena's health demanded attention. Antiretrovirals began, schedules strict, side effects punishing. Nausea layered atop pregnancy fatigue. She learned numbers, counts, acronyms, building literacy from necessity. Support groups offered stories without villains. She spoke little, listening hard. Survival became procedural. Pills, meals, rest, court dates. Love felt distant, replaced by compliance, endurance, and careful hope for the child growing within despite chaos surrounding them and fear daily news cycles, headlines loud. Ethan's world cracked unevenly. Investors asked questions, partners hedged. His temper surfaced in emails leaked accidentally, then not. He denied knowledge of his status, then hedged again. Medical records stayed sealed. Lena sensed strategy shifting from dominance to survival. Money still cushioned falls, but fear thinned patience. The balance tilted, imperceptible yet real. As sickness humbled certainty and power learned limits, it resented deeply amid cameras, courts, medicine schedules closing. They crossed paths once unexpectedly in a hospital corridor. Masks hid mouths, not recognition. Ethan looked smaller, eyes rimmed red. Lena felt no triumph, only weight. He stared, calculating, then turned away. The moment clarified everything. Illness equalized nothing. It merely revealed character under strain, choices under threat, truths postponed until too late for both of them. Consequences already unfolding beyond lawyers, beyond money, beyond apologies, beyond fear, beyond control. That night, Lena received another offer, larger, urgent. Silence priced higher as Ethan worsened. She declined again. Her lawyer warned escalation carried risk. Lena accepted it. Truth had momentum now. She prepared statements, organized evidence, braced for retaliation. She understood money couldn't cure disease or guilt, and that desperation often precedes violence, a lesson learned too late by many, including powerful men, frightened lovers, systems built on silence, secrecy, denial. Across the city, Ethan lay awake, pain managed, fear not, tests multiplied, prognoses narrowed. He reviewed files, replayed decisions, searched for leverage. Lena's refusal echoed. Control slipped. In its absence, something darker stirred, fed by resentment and mortality. He drafted messages he didn't send, plans he didn't share, anger hardening into resolve that would soon cross irreversible lines as illness stripped masks, patience, mercy, options, and time, itself rapidly away. Lena sensed the shift without evidence, a tightening in the air. Threats grew subtler, timing stranger. She adjusted routines, shared locations, trusted instincts sharpened by fear. Protection orders were discussed. Friends returned cautiously. The story moved faster than law. She felt the next chapter approaching. Heavy, inevitable, carrying consequences no settlement could postpone or soften when anger seeks an outlet in shadows. Penthouses, hallways, nights, phones, messages, threats, choices approaching. Somewhere between illness and ego, Ethan decided he would not lose alone. The realization settled coldly. If silence failed, control would change shape. Lena slept fitfully, unaware the ground was shifting beneath both their feet, drawing them toward a night where everything would finally break. And consequences would erupt violently, without warning or mercy, ending negotiations, illusions, patience, restraint, and ushering a tragedy neither could undo ever again tonight soon. Rain hammered the city in relentless sheets as Lena approached Ethan's penthouse, summoned by a message she had ignored for hours. The air smelled of wet asphalt and gasoline, sharp and urgent, as if warning her of what waited above. Her stomach tightened, fatigue mingling with dread, every step echoing in alleys empty except for stray reflections of neon. The lobby was quiet, unusually so. The elevator hummed like a lung holding its breath. Lena's pulse quickened with each floor, imagining confrontations, legal threats, demands. When the doors opened to the penthouse hallway, the silence deepened. Doors aligned like sentinels. Shadows pooled under recessed lighting. She felt the absence of normalcy before she even reached Ethan's door. Inside, the room smelled faintly of antiseptic and expensive cologne, a contradiction she had come to recognize as his signature. Ethan's presence was nowhere immediate, but something was wrong. A glass lay shattered near the minibar, jagged edges catching the dim light like warning shards. Lena's heels clicked hesitantly as she stepped toward the living room, careful not to disturb what might already be gone. Then she saw him. Ethan lay slumped over the leather couch, face pale, eyes half closed, a sheen of sweat marking the line between consciousness and something darker. At first, she thought he slept, but the stillness was too absolute, unnatural. Lena rushed closer, instinct screaming. She called his name, shaking him, pressing a hand to his chest. Heartbeat? Nothing. Panic erupted. She fumbled for her phone, dialing emergency services with trembling fingers. The operator's voice was calm, procedural, like the city itself denied urgency while she screamed through layers of bureaucracy. EMTs arrived within minutes, but the stillness persisted. Every procedure, every touch, met with the same cold resistance from reality. Ethan's body gave no answer, only silent accusation. Police arrived shortly after, drawn by neighbors' calls and the inevitable media attention. Flashing lights reflected off the rain-slicked windows, breaking the penthouse's controlled aesthetic into jagged, real-world fragments. Lena stood aside, soaked and trembling, explaining sequences, denying intentions, recounting schedules and last conversations. Her voice shook, but facts were precise, her truth methodical and deliberate. Questions came in waves. Where had she been? When had she arrived? Did she notice anyone else in the apartment? Lena answered, measured but increasingly aware that silence was her only ally now. Cameras flashed, recording her as suspect, witness, victim simultaneously. Every word, every gesture interpreted as evidence. She felt Ethan's presence even in absence, accusatory, omnipresent, a shadow echoing the control he had wielded while alive. The coroner arrived as night deepened. Lena watched silently, heart constricting as professionals worked with detached precision, cataloging death while the city continued outside, oblivious. Ethan's belongings were collected. His life dismantled piece by piece into files, photographs, lab reports. Lena felt the weight of all his power dissolved into paperwork. The air was thick with finality. A detective approached, notebook open, eyes calculating. He asked about her involvement, her alibi, her intentions. Lena answered carefully, every pause a shield. But beneath her calm, fear pulsed. Someone would not see facts, only narrative. Someone would not see context, only blame. Before she left, she noticed a small envelope tucked under a lamp, one Ethan had prepared but never delivered. Her fingers hesitated. Opening it, she found documents, medical records, phone logs, and a confession of sorts, incomplete but chilling. The implications twisted in her stomach. His death was no longer a quiet anomaly. It became a question, a prelude, a catalyst. Lena stepped into the rain, water soaking through her coat, face numb. The city pulsed with indifference, lights blurring into streaks like fate rushing past. Her phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. "We know what you know, be careful." The night had gone silent, yes, but the echoes it left promised louder, darker consequences. Lena understood, with a sudden clarity that pierced through exhaustion, fear, and grief. Nothing had ended. Everything had changed, and the next step would demand truths neither she nor anyone else could ignore. The room was small, fluorescent light harsh against the pale walls. Lena sat on a metal chair, hands clasped in her lap, eyes trained on the table. Across from her, Detective Ramirez leaned forward, pen poised, notebook open. His questions were soft but pointed, designed to cut through rehearsed narratives. The air smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, sterile yet oppressive, forcing confession without coercion. "Where were you the night Mr. Hale passed?" he asked, voice calm, deliberate. Lena repeated her timeline, voice steady, rehearsed, yet laced with tension she could not suppress. Each word felt like a scalpel, slicing between truth and perception. She remembered the penthouse, the shattered glass, his pale face, the envelope under the lamp. She recounted what she knew, leaving nothing out that she could remember, careful not to speculate. Ramirez nodded, scribbling notes, eyes flicking up occasionally, searching for contradictions. He asked about her relationship with Ethan, probing for control, motive, resentment. Lena spoke of boundaries, rules he imposed, gifts, visits, moments of care that felt transactional, a marriage of convenience rather than affection. She admitted fear, compliance, and the quiet dread that had nested in her chest for weeks. "You understand the timing of his diagnosis?" Ramirez asked, leaning in, eyes narrowing. Lena recounted clinic visits, tests, timelines, repeating exactly what she knew. Her voice shook once when mentioning the first positive result. Silence followed. The detective stared, waiting for more, but Lena had no answers beyond her own experience. He pushed further, referencing messages, phone calls, sudden visits, and appointments. Lena's recollection was precise yet filtered, every statement measured. She noticed the tape recorder, the subtle hum of a camera hidden in the corner. Every word counted, every pause documented. She realized half the interrogation was not about her, but about creating a record of presence, of narrative, of control over perception. Ramirez questioned inconsistencies in Ethan's final days, the medical envelope, and her knowledge of his health. Lena explained the documents had been discovered accidentally after his death. She emphasized her intention. She sought care, safety, and clarity, not vengeance. The detective's pen moved faster, angles and interpretations racing ahead of spoken words. The lawyer assigned to Lena arrived quietly, whispering advice, reminding her to pause, to answer clearly, to separate fact from assumption. Lena appreciated the presence, but even under guidance, she felt vulnerability pressing against her ribs. She remembered his eyes, the weight of his power even in absence, now dissected under fluorescent scrutiny. Hours passed. Lena recounted, corrected, and repeated. She noticed the detective's expression shift when she mentioned hidden correspondence between Ethan and medical professionals. Proof, he had known of his condition long before their relationship. Her revelation hung in the air like a verdict unsaid, reframing suspicion and motive. Finally, Ramirez leaned back. "We'll need more verification," he said, voice neutral, though his eyes betrayed curiosity and unease. "But you've given us a clearer picture." Lena nodded, feeling a small relief, but understanding the investigation had only begun. Her truth existed in fragments, each requiring corroboration. Lies were easy to plant. Facts took painstaking excavation. As she left the room, the corridor felt longer than before, shadows stretching toward her. In her bag, the documents she had uncovered burned like secrets waiting to combust. Outside, Chicago's night whispered in neon and rain. She sensed eyes in every reflection, messages on every screen, rumors forming in the distance. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed. The message read, "The truth isn't enough. Someone wants more." Lena exhaled, realizing the next chapter would not be confined to interrogations. The past had teeth, and consequences were moving closer. What began with secrecy, lies, and control had evolved into a hunt for accountability, and she understood. Survival would demand more than honesty. It would demand courage. Lena sat alone in the clinic waiting room, fluorescent lights humming above, the air heavy with the scent of antiseptic and fear. A folder lay open on her lap, its pages neat but deadly. Test results, timelines, correspondence, each entry a confirmation of what she had feared and suspected. Her hands trembled slightly as she traced lines of data, numbers and dates marking the story Ethan had hidden. The first page confirmed what she had known instinctively, but could not prove until now. Ethan had been HIV positive long before their relationship began. Blood panels, viral loads, and doctor notes all lined up with cold precision. Someone had lied, manipulated, and weaponized knowledge for months. The realization struck her like a fist. Fear surged into anger and anger into icy resolve. Her phone vibrated insistently. A clinic nurse called, double-checking details, reminding her she was authorized to request partner notifications. Lena hesitated, feeling the weight of disclosure press down. She agreed, understanding that accountability required transparency. Each call, each documented message, became part of the story she could no longer hide from herself, or anyone else. Back at her apartment, she spread the folder across the table, rereading every entry. Emails between Ethan and a private physician revealed his knowledge and secrecy. Timeline annotations showed he had arranged tests, falsified results, and manipulated her visits, all while presenting a facade of concern. The betrayal was layered, strategic, and terrifying in its precision. She felt rage twist through her chest, yet beneath it, a somber clarity settled. Ethan's death was no longer a simple tragedy or accident. It was the apex of lies, power, and control. Lena understood why the interrogation had shifted, why suspicion had been directed at her. She had been the one visible, tangible, vulnerable, but not the one who held secrets. The next step required decisions. She documented everything, creating a meticulous record: dates, test results, messages, evidence of coercion. Each note sharpened her understanding, each document a weapon against false narratives. The room seemed smaller, the air heavier, as though the city outside pressed in, waiting for exposure to ripple outward. As night fell, Lena received another call, Detective Ramirez, calm but urgent. "We need to verify a few details about Mr. Hale's prior medical history," he said. His tone implied something unspoken. The truth she now held could rewrite the investigation entirely. Lena promised cooperation, noting a subtle shift in the balance of power. She sat back, eyes tracing the ceiling. The bloodwork had told its story, exposing deceit and intent. Ethan's legacy was no longer untouchable. Lies could be traced, motives dissected. The weight of understanding pressed on her, yet it also empowered her. She realized that what had been hidden for months now belonged to her hands, and with it, the potential to demand justice. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, the same ominous tone. "Some truths are dangerous. Be careful who sees them." Lena stared at the screen, fingers tightening around the device. She knew danger lurked beyond disclosure, but she could no longer retreat. The bloodwork had spoken, secrets had surfaced, and the next chapter, confrontation, exposure, reckoning, was inevitable. In that silence, punctuated only by the hum of the clinic lights and the distant city, Lena made her first real decision. She would not let deceit dictate her life. She would follow the evidence wherever it led, even if it meant facing fury, betrayal, or consequences that stretched far beyond herself. The bloodwork had revealed the truth, but survival demanded action. And action, she realized, would come at a cost she could no longer avoid. The courtroom smelled of polished wood, paper, and tension, a mixture that pressed against Lena's chest as she entered. Cameras from outside flashed, documenting her every step. Journalists whispered through the gallery, dissecting appearances, gestures, and expressions before the trial even began. She felt exposed, a character in a narrative that had spun far beyond her control. The judge called the court to order. Prosecutors outlined charges with clinical precision, layering claims of negligence, deceit, and exposure. Defense attorneys countered, highlighting manipulation, coercion, and the absence of intent. Lena watched, absorbing every word, noting the subtle shifts in tone, the pauses weighted with implication, the murmurs that suggested opinions already formed. Witnesses were called. Friends, colleagues, and medical professionals described interactions, behaviors, and patterns. Ethan's former staff spoke of secrecy, fear, and control. Lena's counsel cross-examined, probing inconsistencies, demonstrating coercion, and highlighting timelines that aligned with her version of events. Each statement built a picture both messy and nuanced, where guilt was not obvious and brokenness was undeniable. When Lena testified, her voice was measured, rehearsed yet sincere. She recounted details from the bloodwork, documents, messages, and clinic visits. She explained her compliance, fear, and confusion, emphasizing intent absent from deception. Questions probed her motives, trying to collapse survival into culpability. Lena answered truthfully, resisting pressure, aware that every word could tip the scales. Psychologists and medical experts presented testimony on the emotional toll, the effects of manipulation, and the psychological impact of knowing betrayal too late. Lena watched Ethan's absence felt heavier than presence, his influence shaping the trial through shadows of emails, documents, and whispers. The courtroom absorbed every nuance. The power imbalance, the secrecy, the emotional erosion that had led to irreversible consequences. Media outside spun stories in real time. Headlines screamed culpability, sympathy, outrage. Lena felt the weight of public perception, the difference between legal truth and societal judgment. She understood that guilty or broken existed on different planes, one measured in evidence, one in narrative, both dangerous, both incomplete. The jury deliberated hours into nights. Lena returned to a private room, reviewing her own documents, tracing patterns, reminding herself of the lines between survival, manipulation, and responsibility. Her pregnancy progressed quietly in the background, a life unaffected by courtroom chatter yet intertwined with every outcome, fragile and steadfast. Finally, the verdict arrived. Silence filled the courtroom. Each juror rose, voices steady but heavy, words measured. Lena's stomach knotted, her hands clenched into fists beneath the table. The words unfolded slowly. Not guilty on some counts, guilty on others, responsibility shared, blame partial. The verdict was neither absolution nor condemnation, but a mirror of complexity she had lived for months. Outside, the press shouted questions, cameras flashed. Lena stepped forward carefully, absorbing statements, correcting misinterpretations, but knowing the real story was known only to her. She glanced at her phone, another message, anonymous. The real reckoning begins now. Lena realized the trial was over, but consequences were just evolving. Guilt, blame, and survival existed beyond the courtroom, in phone calls, hospital visits, whispered threats, and public perception. She was not free. She was not innocent. She was intact, determined, and painfully aware that living meant navigating a world where judgment and justice often diverged. Her eyes scanned the city skyline as dusk fell. She understood now that life demanded resilience, vigilance, and clarity. The courtroom had spoken in rules and papers, but the streets, the shadows, and the echoes of betrayal had their own verdict. Lena exhaled slowly, steeling herself. The next chapter, one of vigilance, exposure, and perhaps redemption, was already unfolding beyond the glass walls. The apartment was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of a desk lamp. Papers, folders, and messages spread across the surface, remnants of months spent tracking timelines, conversations, and betrayals. Lena sat in the middle of it all, exhaustion pressing against her bones. Every step she had taken, every choice she had made, had led to this room, this moment of reckoning, alone with truth and consequences. She reached for her phone and began recording, hands steady despite the fatigue. Her voice was calm at first, factual, detailing events from the first night she met Ethan to the revelation of his health, the pregnancy, the confrontations, and the trial. Each word unfolded like a map, tracing power, fear, manipulation, and survival. She paused occasionally, her mind drifting to the child she carried, a life born into a world tangled with secrets she could not fully control. Then she took a deep breath, hesitating. The confession she was about to speak carried weight she had never shared, a secret tucked away even from the police, the lawyers, the courtroom. Her fingers hovered over the record button, then pressed it, letting the red dot glow steadily. "I've kept something hidden," she began, voice lower now, tinged with shame and resolve. "Something that no one asked about because they assumed everything about me could be judged by appearances, timelines, and documents. But the truth," her throat tightened. "The truth is, I knew about his condition before he told me, not fully, but enough to fear the consequences. I never wanted to hurt him, never wanted to manipulate him, but I didn't speak up because survival felt impossible without caution." Her eyes filled with tears, not for herself, but for the tangled mess of choices, lies, and life she had navigated. She detailed her fears, the moments she considered running, telling someone, exposing the whole chain of events. "I thought silence could protect me. I thought compliance would keep the worst from happening. I was wrong. And yet here I am, still alive, still responsible in ways I didn't expect." Lena leaned back, letting the weight of months settle. She acknowledged the cost, the sleepless nights, the whispered threats, the loneliness, the guilt, the judgment, but also the strength it had forged in her. She had survived the chaos, the betrayals, the public scrutiny, and the legal battles. The city outside continued, indifferent as ever, but she had emerged resolute. She stopped recording and sat in the stillness. The red dot blinked, a quiet witness to her truth. She realized confession did not absolve, but it clarified. It gave her ownership of her story, unfiltered, unjudged, complete. Finally, she stood, placing the phone on the desk. She looked toward the window, the skyline alive with distant lights. A sense of peace settled over her, fragile yet undeniable. The cost had been immense, but survival had been earned. She was no longer merely reacting. She was choosing, living deliberately, shaping her future with clarity born of hardship. Lena exhaled deeply, the city breathing around her. She pressed stop on the recording. Silence filled the room, not empty, but charged with truth finally spoken. Whatever came next, rumors, judgment, fear, could not undo the story she now owned. The past had been costly. The future, however, was hers. She stepped away from the desk, toward a life she would live fully, aware that survival came at a price, and she had paid it with courage, honesty, and unwavering resolve.